Hey, Scott, Sambucci here over at Sales Qualia, and today is part two. Part two of, I'm not sure how many parts it's going to be based on how much time I have for each of these live episodes and podcast episodes. What I want to do is take you through part two of what I'm calling Lessons from the Trail. Startups are ultra marathons. So if you missed part one, then you can go back and listen to it. And I'll just give you the preview of why I'm doing this in case this is the first one that you're checking out. And then we'll just get right to the Startups or Ultra Marathons Lessons from the Trail part two. So for many of you out there, if you've been following me for a while, you know I run ultra marathons, or I also like to do just more general long distance endurance events. I often joke with people, I like to cover long distances by means of self-propulsion. And right now, the big focus for me coming up in the next week, 8 days from today that I'm recording this, just under eight days, 7 days and 23 hours and what does it be, 33 minutes. It will be 5 a.m. on June 26th, and that's when I'm going to be at Olympic Village up in what many of you know as Squaw Valley. That name's soon going to be changed, but I'm calling it Olympic Valley. And so at Olympic Valley is where the race starts, the Western States 100. It's a 100-mile ultra marathon. Starts at Olympic Valley and goes up over the top of the ski resort up to about 8,500 feet, and then works its way down, up and down, up and down, up and down, eventually ending up at Auburn, California. It's the oldest and arguably most prestigious ultramarathon in the world. I was able to get a spot in the race this year, so it's like could quite literally be a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. And so I wanted to make the most of this, and I've been training extremely hard over the last 6 months. I was supposed to do this race last year, and because of COVID, of course, the race was canceled. And so this year, I've been able to actually put in a lot of time and effort and focus on the training. And so throughout the course of the training, I'm out there spending many, many hours on the trail. I've run over 1,200 miles since January 4th. And not to mention the other workouts I'm doing with strength training and mobility and everything else that goes into preparing for a race like this. So that gives you a lot of hours in your head to have conversations. And one of the things I often think about when I'm out there on the trail is like, what am I learning from this? Or what are the applications of this ultra marathon training and running these races? What are the applications to the startup world? And every day in many, many ways, I see these lessons from the trail and how they translate. And so I want to share some of those with you in terms of the lessons I learned from the training and how they transfer, I think, over to running a startup. So yesterday, or the first installment, the first two that I shared were, number one is make hard things routine. Make hard things routine. So to do hard things, you got to do hard things. That's just the way it is. There's no easy way. There's no hack. There's no shortcut to doing hard things like an ultra marathon. And so it's the same with a startup. There's hard things that you have to do every day. And I gave a couple of examples, like, sitting down and simply saying, like, I'm going to do my 20 touches today. I'm going to do my 20 calls. I'm going to do videos even if those make me uncomfortable. I'm going to do the cold calls that I need to do. Forcing yourself to do the things that need to happen in order for you to grow and scale and reach your customers. And those hard things are going to make you feel uncomfortable. You've got to make those hard things routine so that they're just automatic, right? They're not hard. They're still going to be hard to do. Don't get me wrong. It's the difference between making them routine versus not doing them at all. And so the second lesson I shared, which is preparing, what I said was preparing to train. And what I meant by that is that, examples are things like, for me, putting my gear out the night before. I have to get up early for a big run. Getting my food and nutrition ready and in the fridge, all I have to do is grab and go. It's just making myself ready so that when it's time to train, I can just get up and go and do the things that I have to do, so I can use my time efficiently and focus on my mental energy and strength on doing the work that needs to be done. And the translation that I used in the startup world is something as simple as, like, are you preparing time to prep for the demo? You got the big demo coming up in 2 weeks, and you say you're going to rehearse, you say you're going to prepare. Did you block out the time in the calendar? And are you sticking to that time? Are you preparing yourself to do the work? So those are the first two lessons. So today I want to share a couple more lessons, and just like yesterday, we'll see how far we get in the time that I have. We'll probably go about another 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll call it a day and then do a next installment very soon. So lesson number 3, lessons from the trail, startups or ultra marathons. Lesson number 3 is communicate with your team. And related to this is schedule everything. So communicate with your team and schedule everything. So what I mean by that is, the requirements for training to do a race like this. And in particular, one thing I should mention is that not only do I want to just complete the race, which I know is in itself a huge accomplishment to finish this 100-mile race in under the 30 hours that are allotted to you. I want to finish this race in actually not under 30 hours, but actually under 24 hours, a time of 23:59:59 or better, because that's where that earns you what's called the silver buckle award. So finishing this race in under 24 hours is just like the next level beyond just completing the race. It's can you run 100 miles and run this course 100 miles in under 24 hours? It's a pretty significant benchmark for ultra running. You might translate that to marathons, where some people say, look, I want to run a sub 3-hour marathon as an example. So it's doable for me because of the training I've done, but it's going to be a stretch. It's going to be a challenge. So when I talk about communicate with your team and schedule everything, there's a lot of training that goes into doing this. I talked about last time how earlier in the winter and the spring, it was doing 2 trail runs, and then that moved into 3 trail runs a week. So that means 2 of those runs are going to be during the week. I've got to get up early in the morning. I've got to get back in time to get my son to school and help out with breakfast so that my wife isn't shouldering all of the burden on that. I got to make sure that I'm able to help out in the evenings for dinner. So again, she's not feeling like she's got to do everything just because I'm out there training for some race. And so it's so important for me and for her to really be clear on schedules and clear on what's happening. And one of the things that we both do is we put each other's sort of big personal events onto each other's calendar. So in my work calendar, not just for her, but also for my team, I've got time blocked off in my calendar, and I use big purple in my Google Calendar. I use purple as my color for when I'm doing running or training. There's times that are blocked out when I'm doing these long trail runs, including the times on the weekends. I send her a calendar invite, from 5 a.m. to 12 noon on Saturday, Scott long trail run, so that she knows that, hey, I'm planning to do this run on Saturday. Or if there's a Friday trail run that I've got to do, or it's all relative, right? That I want to do, then I got to talk to her and say, okay, look, this Friday I want to drive out to Auburn. It's about a 45-minute drive, and I want to hit that trail. I don't think I'm going to be back to do school. Can you do school drop off today? Or hey, if you do drop off, I can do pickup. And so having that conversation with her every single week about what's going on the week ahead, who's doing what, because she has her things that's going on, not just her work, but her personal hobbies. Like she flies airplanes. She teaches people to fly airplanes. She's a flight instructor. She goes out and does horse riding once a week. That's one of her passions as well. So she's got her stuff that she wants to do. It's just as important to her as the trail running and the races are to me. And so we have to communicate about what's going on. And then further, as the training started back officially on January 4th, as the training has progressed, it also, you're ratcheting up the training. So, back in January, a long run would have been 12 miles, 15 miles. So that's a run I can, get done in under 3 hours. So I can get up on a Saturday, get up at 4, hit the trail by 5:30, 3-hour run, I'm done by 8:30. I'm home. I'm home by 9:30 or 10 in the morning. So to her, it's like, okay, she gets up at 7 in the morning. It's a couple hours in the morning getting breakfast and getting the day going, but Scott's going to be home by 10, not a big deal. As the training progresses, now those 12, 15-mile training runs turn into 20-mile, 25-mile runs. At one point, I did a 37-mile run and a 50-mile run. So these, Scott trail run on Saturdays that used to be back, it could be home by 10, 11 o'clock. Now it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. For the 50-mile run, I was home 7:30 that night, 8 o'clock that night, as the sun is, setting. I'm just getting back after being up at 3:45 in the morning. So now she's got the full day. And so communicating to her, not just week to week, but how the training is progressing and getting larger and why these workouts are important. Why do I want to do that 50-mile run? Well, here's why. Because it starts at this place called Robinson Flat, which is mile 30 on the course. And we're going to run all the way to a place called Rucky Chuck, which is roughly 50 miles. It's the middle 50 miles of the race from mile 30 to mile 80. So it's really important for me to get familiar with the course, to get some time estimates that if I'm going to translate my training into what I think I can do on race day, I want to see how well I do. How do my legs hold up? Do I get any blisters on my feet? How's my nutrition? How's my hydration? It's my race plan. It's basically simulating a race, doing 50 miles and doing it on the course. So communicating all that to her so she knows it's important for me to get to the outcome that I want to get. And so she understands that. Scheduling and planning and adjusting as well is important. So I'm planning my weeks and months sometimes, sitting with my coach and doing 3-week time blocks. And he's saying, okay, look, over the next 3 weeks, here are the workouts that I want you to do or that I'm recommending that you do. And then mapping those workouts that, he's sitting in a isolated chamber saying, okay, I want you to do these workouts on these days, but then I got to look at the real world. I got to look at my life and say, okay, well, can I really do all of these runs on these days that he wants me to do, or do I need to move things around? So one example was my wife's birthday was on a Saturday. We wanted to have some people over, and that's also usually the day where I'm doing a long trail run. Well, I'm not going to disappear on a Saturday morning at 5 a.m. and reappear at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on her birthday. I want to spend that day with her. It's her day. And so what that means is, moving my long trail run on from a Saturday into a Friday and doing the other two trail runs on a Monday and a Wednesday. Instead of a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which also means that I got to say, look, on Monday, I'm usually at home to do breakfast and school drop off. Because I want to spend that time with you on Saturday, I got to move things around. Is that cool? Are you okay with that? Not just assuming that I can, because if she has something else going on, then it's not fair to her. So like that lesson around communication is really what has enabled us to have a very positive relationship and helping her have a positive experience around this too. I think for a lot of people that do these kinds of races, and I experienced this when I was training for Ironmans years ago, Ironman triathlons, and I just know talking with other people that do these kinds of events, that do these kinds of races, at best, they can hope for partner neutrality. They kind of hope for if I can just get my spouse or my wife or my husband or my partner to just be okay with it, then that's pretty good. And for us, I think it's well beyond that. I mean, I know my wife is extremely supportive. She knows how important this is for me. It's she likes to tell me that this is how I express myself. And so she knows that this is something that I find important. This is something that I want to do. And she's extremely supportive on that. And it's, I think, in large part because we communicate and that she's not feeling the stress and there's no surprise. I'm not going to be around on Saturday. It's that communication is what allows her to feel like I'm doing what I can to communicate with her. And then if we need to move things around, we can do that. So what does that mean for startups, running startups? And specifically, what does that mean from a selling standpoint at startups? Well, as a leader in your company, I would ask you and maybe even challenge you, are you sharing your sales strategy with your entire team? Not just maybe the couple people that are working with you on the sales team, not just the marketing team, or not just pressing the product or engineering team at the last minute, why you got to get this feature out. But are you sitting back with the whole company and talking to your engineering team, talking to your product teams, explaining to them look, this is where we are in the sales process. This is our doing even pipeline reviews with your sales team. And in some cases, that might mean exposing yourself to some errors that you might be making, or trying to explain to engineers that hey, yeah, back in March, I thought I was all excited about that deal I shared with you around Wells Fargo. Well, yeah, I know it's June and I thought it was going to close by now, but it's not. and here's all the reasons why. I didn't get, access to the right buyers. I thought that they asked for the proposal and that meant they were ready to go. And it turns out that that's really just the starting point. Like just by putting yourself out there and communicating to your team, it can be hard. You're setting yourself up to be, you got to be vulnerable, and you're setting yourself up for maybe what you might feel like is some personal embarrassment. I think it's so critical though to do that, like helping the team understand, like, why did these things take so long? I remember when I was at Blend, oftentimes, in the lunch, we'd have lunch come in and we'd sit down and talk to engineers, and the engineers would ask me about the sales process, and I'd start explaining it to them just like they might explain to me how they're doing code. I mean, it's just a process, it's analysis, it's steps along the way, and explaining to them like what it means to do enterprise sales, what the steps are involved, the nuances that are required to get an enterprise deal from not just interested but ready to buy. And that education for them, they shared with me how much they appreciated getting some insight and some perspective on what it takes to get some of these deals across the line and get them converted. I think it's so critical if you can communicate with your team, not just on the sales team, but the product team, the engineering team, help them understand that, we just ran, for example, a webinar, a training a couple of weeks ago called Q4 Starts Now. So right now it's middle of June. I ran this training back on June 3rd. Q4 starts now. Well, why does Q4 start now? Well, there's all these reasons why your Q4 number is going to be based on the activity that you're doing in June and in May and in July. Like, if you don't do certain things now, you're not going to hit your Q4 number. It's just the way it is. You got to communicate that stuff to your team. Help them understand, hey, those product sprints that you're working on right now, or those features, those integrations, those bug fixes, here's why they're going to be so important for us in order to convert the deals that we have in the pipeline right now. Helping them understand that the patience that's going to be required and the process that's required on the sales side. And so that's just one example of communication with your team to help them rally and support, so that, when it's late at night and it's 2:00 in the morning and they're, need to do that next code push in order to hit the sprint. Now they've got a lot more perspective as to why that one feature, why that one bug fix, why that one integration is so important, why they need to do the extra round of QA testing before you go live, because you got that big demo coming up next week. You want to make sure that the product works the way that you want it to work and show that specific feature to that prospect, because that's a key part of their decision-making criteria. So I think that communication is going to help them not only become more aware, but it's also going to help them be more supportive, just like I explained with my wife. It's not just like, hey, this is what's going on, and they nod their head and go, okay, I got it. And they're sort of like neutral towards sales. It's like, oh, wow, now that I'm clear about what's happening, not just in the next 2 weeks, but the next 2 months and the next 6 months, now I can do even more to be supportive. And we had this with engineers at Blend, where they would come after understanding the sales process and understanding some of the deals in the pipeline. They would come and ask me about it, like, hey, how's it going with that conversation you're having at Wells Fargo? Like, is there anything else that you need? I had one engineer there named Ian who would often help me with setting up instances so we could do product demos, custom product demos, and being able to communicate with him and not just say, hey, Ian, I need you to, can you set up an instance for me because I got to do this demo. It wasn't just like sales guy asking engineering guy for a favor. He understood, I got it. Like, we're in the demo phase now with this customer. So that means you probably have had 2 or 3 months of conversation just to get to this meeting. So that's why it's so important for you to have this demo instance, because you really want to wow them. So he had that perspective because I was able to communicate with him and the rest of the engineering team as to why and how the sales process works the way it does. So that's my first lesson that I want to share with you today. Is just communicate with your team and schedule everything. Make sure that everybody's really clear about what needs to happen and why it needs to happen. Okay. So that's one lesson. The second thing I'll share, the second lesson I think I'll share, and then we'll call it a day, is what I wrote down is automate decisions. Automate decisions. So I've read one of my favorite books out there is by Greg McKeown. I think previously I've referred to him as Greg McCown, but that was wrong. It's Greg McKeown. So Greg McKeown wrote a book called Essentialism. It was published a few years ago. Many of you might have come across it. It's one of my favorite books. I've read it a couple of times. And one of the main lessons for me out of that book was that make one decision that saves 1,000. One decision that saves 1,000. So that every day you're not having to worry about, okay, what do I do about this situation or that situation? If you just bring it up a level, you say, in all of these situations, this is the one way we're going to handle it. So then I don't have to make a series of micro decisions every day, which just creates decision fatigue. And for me, at least, it creates anxiety, and it just wears me down, right? And so in the world of training for these races, take a sip of coffee so I can wet my whistle. For me, it's the removing micro decisions around something as simple as diet. So my diet, or how I eat, my fuel consumption, as it's sometimes think about it. It's thinking about and communicating as well, by the way, with friends and family, micro decisions about what I'm going to eat and what I'm not going to eat. Right. So when the other day, last weekend, I drove out to Dillon Beach with my son, hanging out with some friends that were staying out there for a week, and we went to the beach, spent a couple hours at the beach, went back to their apartment where the house that they rented, and they were gonna just make some hot dogs and have like a quick lunch so we can get back out and have some more fun outside. And like my friends know I'm training for this race because I talk about it as we're hanging out with the kids. And so it came time for hot dogs, and it was like, "Hey Scott, how many hot dogs do you want? Two? Okay, cool. No bun, right?" Yeah, no bun, no hot dog bun, right? I don't eat. I very low carb in my diet. Like they just know. So I've made that decision and I communicate that decision. Um, the same with alcohol. Like right now, I've talked to my wife. Yeah, every once in a while throughout the course of a few months, I might have a beer or a glass of wine. But as we're getting closer to the race, I basically got to a point where like, look, from here on out, no alcohol, right? I just not a sip of wine, not a beer, just letting you know now, so that if it's Sunday and we're gonna have like a nice dinner together, maybe we're gonna cook up a steak or something. She might want a glass of wine, which is cool. But just want to let you know, you don't even have to offer to me because the answer is no. Because that way, even if you offer to me, I gotta like in my brain make that little like maybe I'll just have a little bit. It's like no, the decision is no alcohol, and that way I don't have to worry about making micro decisions along the way. I did this a couple years ago. The T-shirt I'm wearing right now is the Terra Wear Ultramarathon, which is a race I did down excuse me, a race I did down in New Zealand just before the pandemic hit. It was the end of January, early February 2020. And I did the same thing. Because the race was at the end of January, that meant I was training through the fall and into the winter. So that meant the holiday season, especially Thanksgiving and Christmas, where usually, that's a great time to have some good food and some wine and some cheer with friends. And same thing, I just made the decision, November 1st, no alcohol. So that meant no alcohol Thanksgiving dinner, no alcohol Christmas, no alcohol on New Year's Eve. And it's just one decision, that decision that saves 1,000. And the same with, that same instance we were when I said I was out in Dillon Beach, we took the kids down, got them some ice cream, same thing. Me and the other dad, the two kids, and dad's like, just 3 ice creams, right? Me and the 2 kids. I'm like, yep, I'm good. He's like, you don't want any, do you? Nope, I'm good. And so again, like just everyone knows. The same with like for me getting to bed. Bedtime is for me, I want to be in bed and hopefully asleep by 9 p.m. And because I want to be up at 4 a.m. I want to get 7 hours of sleep during the week. During the weekend, and I try to get a little bit more, but 7 hours, like I want to get those 7 hours. I need to rest. I need to recover. So same thing. It's just like automating that decision. I'm not sitting around every day going like, I hope I can get to bed by a certain time. It's like, no, my wife knows. I've communicated that with her, which goes back to the principle I just shared a moment ago. Communicate everything. Like, look, I want to be in bed by 9 because I want to get up at 4. So that's just like an automated decision. I don't have to worry about that. And I can get her support. I've heard this quote. I heard it from David Goggins, and who some of you might have come across. He wrote a book recently called "Can't Hurt Me." He's also not also. He is I say also because I was thinking about Jocko Willink, who's a retired Navy SEAL. David Goggins is also a former Navy SEAL. and he wrote this book, Can't Hurt Me. Um, and so he has this quote that I'm not sure if he came up with it or heard it from somebody else, but it's how you do anything is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that relates to automate decisions. You're just like, hey, this is how I do things. Even as like yesterday when I came home from Squaw Valley or Olympic Village, sometimes I still slip and call it Squaw Valley. I had a bunch of stuff. Like I had some, food bag, I had my cooler, I had my gear bag, and everything comes in, drop everything on the floor. But one of the first things I always do when I come home is I don't want to just leave that stuff sitting there. So yeah, drop my bag, say hello to everyone, and then the next 20 minutes is just getting stuff put away. And the reason I do that is how I do anything is how I do everything. I want everything to be back in its place, and I don't want this pile of stuff being a burden for the rest of the family. I got shoes, dusty shoes, and shirts that I've been wearing that I've been sweating in. So I think it's just really important to I just made that a decision. When I come home, drop my stuff, say hello, and then get to work getting it clean. Cleaning up my water bottles, getting that all set. So how you do anything is how you do everything, and automate decisions. So what does that mean in terms of sales? Well, automating your decisions, like who is your target market? Who is your ideal customer profile? Like, are you focused on that? We just ran a training yesterday. We had Todd Capone come in and he talked about his 5 F's on how to run an effective sales organization. And the very first F was focus. What is your focus market? What are the firmographics? What are the demographics? And part of that is automating the decision of who are we working with? Who is our target market? Who are we focusing on? And who are we not focusing on? So when those leads come in, you don't have to like hem and haw, like, oh, well, this one's not really in our target market, but they kind of are. So maybe let's do the demo anyway. And now 3 or 4 or 5 months down the road, you're lost on this tangent rabbit trail of a deal that really isn't your target market. And maybe now they're asking for certain product features, or they're asking for the roadmap to be adjusted, and it really doesn't align with the rest of the companies that you do want to target. So just getting really specific is like that one decision that saves 1,000. And communicating that with your team. Here's our target market. This is our ideal customer profile. These are the people that we want to help right now. For now, right? We can always change and grow and expand later on, but for now, this is the decision of who we are targeting, right? The same with this idea of like automating your decisions. It's preparing your call. It's like getting to a place where, like, when I book that demo with that company that's going to be in 10 days, then the second thing I do, the minute I book that demo and I send them that calendar invite, the second thing I do is I make sure that I have at least 2 30-minute blocks put into my own personal calendar so that I can do the preparation that I want to do, right? Just like automate that decision. So you don't have to sit around and worry about like, oh, I got this demo coming up. When am I going to get a chance to prepare? If you just automate it and you automate the time in your calendar, automate putting the time in your calendar, you never have to worry about having the time set aside. So the last thing I'll mention is just in terms of like creep of decision. So there's a famous psychological experiment, the Milgram experiment. Some of you might have come across, and it's the idea of the short of it is that they put subjects in a room and they sit on the other side of this wall. Somebody's hooked up to some voltage, and you're going to ask them questions. If they answer the question incorrectly, you have to give them 10 volts, a little charge of electricity. And each subsequent answer, you have to increase the voltage by another 10 volts. So the first incorrect answer is 10 volts, the second incorrect answer is 20, then 30, then 40. And eventually you get to a place where the amount of voltage could literally kill a human. And as people on the other side of the wall were part of the experiment, they were purposely answering incorrect questions. They would have the person who was administering the air quotes experiment would tell the person, like, look, they answered incorrectly. You have to give them 10 more volts. And some of the subjects were like, but this is like an insane amount of voltage. This could hurt this person. And if they shocked them with that much voltage, they could hear the other person screaming. And what they found is that it wasn't that the individual person wanted to hurt the other side, but they had just gotten so slowly adjusted to like 10 volts, 10 more volts, 10 more volts, that the compliance was easier in the mind of the person giving the shocks than if they were to just walk in a room and say, hey, I want you to shock that person with 150 volts of electricity. And so this idea of 10 volts is really important. My wife and I use this when we're trying to make decisions about something and saying like, is there creep here? And I always say like 10 volts, meaning like if we, if we make an exception here, like what's the next exception that we're going to make? What's the next one after that? And now all of a sudden, where we thought we had this rigid decision-making criteria, we let those 10 volts start to slip. And now that one decision that was supposed to save 1,000, we're back to making 1,000 decisions. So I think it's important to think about that in context of your sales and your work and your scheduling. And it could be something as simple as how you qualify leads or how you stick to your pricing. And say like this is our decision. This is how we do pricing. And if people want discounts, okay, they're just not a good fit for us because this is the price. And if people want a discount, maybe it's on us. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job of showing value. So that automation of decision could actually help you reveal another shortfall or shortcoming in your sales process. So, okay, so those are my 2 for today, which is communicate with your team and schedule. And the second one is automate decision. So I got to hop because I'm coming up to, it's now 5:57 and I got a client call at 6 a.m. So I got to roll. So thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching to this installment of Startup, our Ultra Marathons Lessons from the Trail. I'll do another one very soon. Hit me up if you got some questions on this or if you want some help with translating some of this work or any work that you need done with your sales process. If you're looking to ramp up and scale up, you want to get more repeatability and scalability in your sales process, a lot of times it's having these core principles in place and the right systems in place, and that's what we do here every single day at Sales Qualia. So shoot me an email, scott@salesqualia, Qualia.com, scott@salesqualia.com. You can just write the word private in the subject line. Just let me know you want to have a quick conversation to understand more about your situation to see if or how we can help. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn or watching it later, you can either shoot me a DM or just leave a comment and we'll get something set up. All right, that's it for now. Thanks so much for listening. This is Scott Sabucci signing off.